How awesome a superhero do you have to be that your villains end up forming multiple super bands? Iron Man may be responsible for half the villains in the MCU, but in the comics, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man
That's me! I gotta go!
has managed to generate some powerful hate from one of the best rogues galleries in comics. Their supergroup, the Sinister Six, has been on the wish list of everyone who's adapted Spider-Man, and now the MCU appears to be getting them all in on realizing that wish. What can different versions of the Spidey Haters Club tell us about the team we'll see in No Way Home? The origins of the Sinister Six are pretty straightforward. Dr. Octopus thought the same thing that people do watching bad guys go after the hero one at a time. What if they ganged up? So after taking 3 L's in a row, including the last one that saw him separated from his robot arms, he sent out a massive invitation to see if anyone wanted to get together and solve this pesky Spider-Man issue they were having. After his arms broke him out of prison because comics, he found only 5 had answered the call. That included Mysterio, Vulture, Electro, Kraven, and Sandman. They were in luck because Spidey's self-doubt had robbed him of his powers, but since they hadn't really sorted out the idea of a team would be to gang up on him, they instead went after him one at a time, enough to give Spidey a chance to beat them all in turn after being attacked reactivated his powers. Now this isn't that different from a plot point in Spider-Man 2, which featured Doc Ock, where Peter found his powers on the fritz. The 3 villains we know are coming back, either by their actors not being great at keeping secrets or them greeting Peter, are Dr. Octopus, Electro, and Green Goblin. If Hayden Thomas Church is in No Way Home, he's been doing a better job of keeping quiet, but that hasn't meant that fans haven't speculated that things are perhaps a little more dusty than they should be in the trailer, suggesting Sandman is joining the band. Mysterio supposedly died in Far From Home, but Mysterio supposedly did a lot of things. Deception is his whole bag. Vulture has already popped up in the trailer for Morpheus, sending the whole question of the multiverse swirling long before Wanda rewrote A Town in New Jersey and an alternate Loki took her complaint to the manager. That leaves Kraven the Hunter, who hasn't appeared in anything yet, but he had been cast long before the movie had even entered the serious stages of pre-production. The last time that happened, Kang appeared ahead of schedule in Loki. A lot of the times when a supervillain's plan fails, they dump the whole thing and start from scratch on a whole new master plan, even if the hero only beat them because of some coincidence. Doc Ock didn't repeat this mistake by repeating the idea of putting together a superband. But there's no honor among supervillains, and it was all a distraction for his real scheme to infect the cocaine supply and then extort the users because 80s. There were some change-ups in the team, one that's too complicated. Kraven was replaced by his son, and another is a Spider-Man villain that's been hiding in plain sight almost the entire time that Spider-Man's been in the MCU. Hobgoblin. A lot of people have used the moniker Hobgoblin, and one of those people is Ned Leeds, Peter Parker's man in the chair. Ned Leeds making a heel turn could fill out the Sinister Six. It could be a Ned Leeds from another reality, or it could just be that once Doctor Strange's spell took effect, Ned's whole position did as well vis-a-vis Spider-Man. Now, you don't have to stop at 6 because it makes a cool alliteration. You also get one out of the Sinister Seven. This was a team that was formed for its own case of multiple Spider-Man syndrome. This time, it wasn't a product of the multiverse, but the old-fashioned way. The Jackal had cloned Spider-Man in an appropriately convoluted plan to punish Spider-Man for not saving Gwen Stacy, as if Spider-Man wouldn't punish himself for that. One of those clones went on to become the Scarlet Spider, taking on the alias of Ben Reilly, using Uncle Ben's name and Aunt May's maiden name. Ben Reilly had taken Peter's place in prison while Peter sorted out another clone-related issue, Kane. Now, he had been taking care of Spider-Man's foes once and for all, which is a step too far for Peter, who even during this story cut off a pursuit of the Beetle to care for some people that the Beetle had injured. Hobgoblin threw this group together with Vulture, Mysterio, and Electro. New members include the Shocker, who we last saw in Homecoming, and Scorpia, who used an updated version of Scorpion's setup. We saw Matt Gargan, otherwise known as Scorpion, at the end of Homecoming asking Vulture if he knew who Spider-Man was. It's not likely that anyone is going to mistake Tobey Maguire as Tom Holland, but it is a version of the team formed to deal with a more extreme Spider-Man. One of the questions regarding Sony's desire for a Sinister Six movie is the same thing people wondered when Venom got his own movie, notably absent the presence of Spider-Man. What is a Spider-Man villain without Spider-Man? Venom has been leaning on Venom's difficulty getting on with other Clintarians. The Sinister Six have a bit of the same issue. After Doc Ock betrayed his own team with his master plan during their second go, it didn't really sit well with Sandman, who was turned to glass in the process. Kraven's son took Kraven's spot, with Vulture and Electro both rejoining. While there was a Mysterio, it wasn't the Mysterio Quentin Beck who joined, which is another way for the domed super faker to join the fray in No Way Home. You see, big clouds of dust and clutter like we see in the trailers is part of Mysterio's aesthetic. Another big change that could happen is Venom taking Doc Ock's slot. Naturally, when the team didn't work out, Venom just went nuts on the other members of the team because he's Venom. Venom is not great in teams. Now, you may have noticed one glaring omission in this cavalcade of bad guys that have formed the Sinister Six. None of them contained the Green Goblin, but the trailer contained a telltale laugh and that signature pumpkin bomb. Why does a goblin throw pumpkins? Don't worry about it. At some point, Norman Osborn found himself in a position that the MCU's Peter Parker should be familiar with. His identity as the Green Goblin had been revealed. First to join this band was Matt Gargan as Scorpion, who hired Black Cat to bust the Goblin out of prison, and then he doubled his pleasure, doubled his fun by bumping the six up to an even dozen, throwing in Chameleon, Hammerhead, Tombstone, Boomerang, and Hydro Man, on top of stalwarts like Lizard, Sandman, and Vulture. For those who worried about the third Spider-Man movie having too many characters in it, this isn't even the worst-case scenario. When Steve Rogers and Tony Stark started settling their differences in a punchy-kicky kind of way that ended up enlisting the entire superhero roster into a civil war, do you ever wonder what the bad guys got up to while the parents were fighting? In the ink and paper Civil War, the Sinister Six got together, including standard members like Doc Ock, Vulture, and Shocker, with Lizard, who of course was the baddie in the first Amazing Spider-Man. This team added two new members, including a bit of a B-lister in Trapster, who is not likely to appear unless it's a squint and you'll miss him role like the Tinkerer. But there is another character that was teased but never revealed that joined the group whose first hate wasn't Spider-Man. The Grim Reaper's most hated is Vision because, by his estimation, Vision stole his brother's actual personality. The Grim Reaper's helmet showed up at an Easter egg in WandaVision, but speculation of his arrival was far overshadowed by theories involving Mephisto. This combo's motivation could be similar as the world deals with the loss of several key Avengers and a bit of a shakeup with the existing members, including Vision's girlfriend, getting a little drastic. Grim Reaper is probably about as likely as Mephisto turned out to be, though. During the big timeline, Doc Ock got the band back together after Spider-Man had his own set of super friends by joining the Avengers. He even got to be the man in charge when they thwarted a giant Octobot. There isn't a lot of things that are novel in this arrangement of the team, with Rhino filling in for Kraven in the lineup of stalwarts that includes Sandman, Electro, Mysterio, and Chameleon. So, how does this group relate to the coming of big screen Sinister Six then? Well, after Dr. Octopus's Octobot thing doesn't work out, they end up with a new plan. Zombie Pirates of the Caribbean. A little bit of brand and franchise symmetry? The MCU and the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise? Yeah, maybe we should just move on. Okay, so there's not a lot of chance of Captain Jack Sparrow or Davy Jones showing up in No Way Home. That's ridiculous. Why would they do that? During the Ends of the Earth event, though, the same grouping pulled another big scheme that would, in the big screen anyway, end up being the biggest fake-out in MCU history. With all the attention on former Spider foes and Spider-Man spilling that they're in the movie or not in the movie, maybe it's all to keep us from looking in the right direction. During Ends of the Earth, the Six get a rare W when Dr. Octopus sets up satellites to accelerate the greenhouse effect and then accepts payment to not do that. Doc Ock's payment is 200 missiles that he uses to launch even more satellites, and when Spider-Man and his amazing friends show up, they face a new Sinister Six. Mind-controlled Avengers. Imagine that plot twist. But then, Wanda is busy, Sam Wilson is just getting into his new role as Captain America, Hawkeye's training someone new. Alright, this is even less likely than the Pirates, but at least it'd be in universe. Now, one of the strange streaks in Spider-Man's foes is that they tend to get it in their head that they could do a better job of being Spider-Man than Spider-Man. Kraven tried, Venom worked himself into an anti-hero to see if he could out-hero Spider-Man, and Doc Ock took his swing at being the web-slinger. This led to Doc Ock becoming the superior Spider-Man, but he didn't give up his Sinister Six ways. After setting operations at the raft and calling it Spider Island, he recycled that mind control to recruit Sandman, Electro, Vulture, Chameleon, and someone who just found Mysterio's armor and was going by Mysterion. If there is any reason for a Spider-Man to end up fighting a Spider-Man, it is that one is being controlled by Dr. Octopus. Remember when we said the Sinister 12 wasn't the most overstuffed the Sinister moniker could get? Well, that peak isn't even the Sinister 16, it's the Sinister 66, the everything bagel of the Sinister 6 teams. Now, this wasn't even at the behest of a regular Spider-Man villain. Instead, it came from a world of X-Men villains, but the nature of the villain creates a window for all the villains. Mojo is a product of the multiverse, and in the reality he comes from, he controls via a massive media system that includes things like a reality show where everyone who's ever hated Spider-Man tries to kill Spider-Man. It would be a drastic introduction of a classic X-Men villain and perhaps some X-Men characters. Though that is a lot to ask for a Spider-Man movie, but it already seems like they're bringing back all of Spider-Man's cinematic villains. That's important to properly secure all of your gear as a superhero, otherwise you never know what'll happen to it. Like, perhaps Aaron Davis, the Prowler, will steal your iron spider suit and recolor it, then go find the usual suspects like Sandman, Hobgoblin, a new version of Electro, and adding the Spot and Bombshell to steal a helicarrier. Because subtlety is for losers. The team betrays each other, tries to undercut everyone else in the team, the usual stuff. What's significant here for No Way Home is the Prowler, Aaron Davis. In the MCU, he was last seen webbed to a trunk lid, but he also happens to be the uncle of Spider-Verse star Miles Morales. What a great in for that character. I mean, convoluted, but still. By now, we all know that the password for Phase 4 is the multiverse. And there have been some of these team lineups that have multiverse implications, but none more than the group involved in the Sinister War. In this one, frequent members Doc Ock, Sandman, Electro, Kraven, Mysterio, and Lizard, all who have appeared before except Kraven, who has already been cast, but Spider-Man turns out to not be their biggest problem, but rather the Savage Six from the MC2 universe who fill their time menacing Peter and MJ's daughter Mayday Parker, the Spider-Girl. Running into an alternate version of Peter's life where MJ and Peter had a kid would be pretty big, especially if it was Tobey Maguire's Peter and Kirsten Dunst's MJ. The Savage Six has included Eddie Brock, this time with Toxin, Vulture, Rhino, and Scorpion, and adds Jack-O-Lantern. Somehow, Halloween decorations have a special hate for Spider-Man. Everything goes better with zombies, right? Alright, this is a wild pitch in a sea of wild pitches, so buckle up. Marvel Zombies is set to be one of the episodes of What If, inspired by the Marvel Zombies event. That event had a lineup that includes Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, Vulture, Sandman, Electro, and Mysterio, all villains who have appeared on the screen already. But what about the zombie thing? Well, if you're not up to date on What If, just, go ahead like 20 seconds. Hit that right arrow key like 4 times. What If hasn't been as separate as we would have thought. Something very Shumagorath-like has shown up twice now, and a visit to an alternate reality Doctor Strange not only included a discussion with the Watcher, but may very well have set up an alternate Doctor Strange that might be the one Peter's mistaking for his Doctor Strange in No Way Home. While this may have zombies making their way into Peter's multiple reality shenanigans, this lineup is the least amount of stretch. 2015's Secret Wars was a collision of realities that was meant to end the Marvel Ultimates line by having a multi-reality battle royale. The lineup of this team is Doc Ock, Kraven, Hobgoblin, Mysterio, Shocker, and Vulture. Though it's not the lineup that makes the difference here, but rather the circumstances. Or perhaps the Sinister Six we get in No Way Home is nothing but a prelude to another iteration we get when the MCU has its own Secret War. Even more fittingly, this particular team was assembled to get rid of a group of Spider-Folk that includes Spider-Ham. Spider-Gwen was one of those who snuck into the Oscorp headquarters and learned that Sinister is in the eyes of the beholder, as her team of web-slingers was labeled as the Sinister Six. Makes you think, huh? Not really. Stepping out of Earth 616 for inspiration, we find ourselves in Earth 70237, set 30 years in the future where Spider-Man has to come out of retirement. This lineup includes mostly familiar faces, including Scorpion, Electro, Mysterio, Kraven, Sandman, and adds Hydro Man. Hydro-Man hasn't appeared, but Mysterio created the illusion of Hydron of the Elementals, as well as name-dropped Hydro-Man's secret identity. What makes this one possible is that Sandman ultimately flips to the good guys, reminiscent of his redemption arc in Spider-Man 3, as they turn their attention to variations of Venom. In all of this excitement, has anyone checked in on Topher Grace? Ever since Jamie Foxx posted an Instagram image of 3 Spider-Men to announce that he'd return as Electro, Spider-Verse has been at the forefront of everyone's mind, no matter how emphatically Andrew Garfield insists he's not in it. This isn't the first time multiple Spider-Folk have collided. In the Spider-Verse, there is of course a Sinister Six, and fittingly, it has a lineup close to what we already know. Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, and Electro, with Mysterio, Vulture, and Kraven the Hunter rounding the team out. The lineup that's probably the closest to what we'll get appeared in a very unlikely place, the far end of the Spider-Verse, where up is down and weird is the order of the day. Spider-Ham. The goofy self-parody of Spider-Man comics that ended up taking on a life of his own faced his own version of the Sinister Six that just so happens to resemble what is already on the table for No Way Home. The spider bit by a radioactive pig faced his own version of Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, Sandman, Electro, Vulture, and Mysterio as the Sinister Six. That's the 3 characters we've already seen and 3 characters that already exist in one franchise or another. Only they were Buzzard, Dr. Octopussycat, Mysteriape, Electro, Sandmanatee, and the Green Gobbler. Which honestly, well, that'd be a pretty fun team to see. And that's not even all of the Sinister Six combos. There are a few that don't have any villains we've seen yet. Iron Man could dream of creating this many villains who have a specific thing for Spider-Man. Oh, maybe that'll be how Peter jumps out of Tony's shadow, by making people mad.